Hi, Joel. Loving the Be a Brilliant Human podcast. You choose some great topics. You give amazing insights, advice, guidance, tips, and you do it all with such great humour and humanity that you make it totally okay to be a complete fuck up. Thank you very much, and keep going. Can't wait for the next 100. Take care. Bye.
Welcome to the Be a Brilliant Human podcast. You're in the right place if you're a growth-seeking being who acknowledges the challenges and delights of your humanity on the path to an ever more conscious life. If you want to feel inspired to love and accept yourself, to feel free to be and express you in all your brilliance, if you want to truly value yourself and others and feel energized and alive both at home and in the world, then sit back and take a breath as you explore and grow the brilliance of your beautiful human self with your host, the father of non-personal awareness and creator of the MPA process, Joel Young.
Hello, and woohoo! It is the 100th episode. I've been talking about this for a while. I'm super excited. I can't believe we're at episode 100 already. So today I am just celebrating. I am being a little bit self-indulgent, I guess. But I'm looking at what are the top 10. I'm going to be doing pop pickers style top 10 for you. And I've based it on listens and downloads across the various platforms, including YouTube. Done my tally, figured out what are those top 10. I'm going to give you an honourable mention from one of our listeners and one of my own, and I'm going to give you some clips. I'm not going to give you clips of every single one. I'll walk you through them. But before we get into the top 10, thank you so much for being here. If you're brand new, it's an interesting one to start with. It'll certainly give you a flavour of what this show is about. But if you've been around either for the whole time, if that's the case, wow, that's so fantastic, or even for part of it, I so appreciate your listens. You no idea if you listen regularly. I love that I get to spend this time in your ears every week. And by the way, yes, the intro, thanks to Helen Lord for that, who actually left a voice message. You lot seem a little bit shy about leaving the voice messages. Maybe it's because I put them on the show. I don't know. But that was a lovely message to receive. Plus, I've had several emails from different people saying, congratulations on the 100. But yeah, I'm just, you can hear, I'm like, oh, what do I say? It's the 100th episode. So the tally's in. For me, there's a few surprises in there. You never really know what's going to take off. I'm not someone who really watches the metrics from week to week. I kind of put it out there and let it do its thing. So it's quite an interesting exercise going through all of that today, and I'm figuring out what were those top 10. So I think, because there are 10 of them to get through, I think right now together we should go in and celebrate. Pop pickers, get ready for the countdown. Here we go. So, kicking us off at number 10, we go all the way back to episode 5, which was making the decision to let go, how to connect with your inner decision maker. Gosh, this is going back a long way, but there was a few. In fact, there's one even earlier that was going to make the top 10. Find out what that one is soon. But this was an interesting episode because it was one of the early ones where I started to really introduce you to the relational approach that comes from MPA and non-personal awareness, and the sort of trick of using personification. Because in that episode I talk about, often the decision, there's a lot of decision pressure around sort of forcing ourselves to make a decision, especially when it comes to letting go. But what I offer in episode number 5 is a kind of a framework which invites you to sort of do more of a personification. Rather than thinking about making a decision, you're connecting with your inner decision maker and kind of spending time with them. Because again, in the relational model that I often talk about, it's about through that relational shift, through the connection, even with our inner parts, that things become a lot more fluid and a lot more easy. So it's an early one, but I do think it's a great one to listen to. So as ever, what I'm going to do, actually, I didn't say this in the sort of earlier part, but I will put a list. I'll put a simple linked list in the show notes, which will be, of course, www.beabrillianthuman.com/100. And I'll also put sort of a more detailed list with all the sort of the pictures for all the episodes, so you've got them all to hand. You will be able to see what they are and link through to listen. So if any of these spark your interest, go and check them out. And in at number 10, episode 5, Making the Decision to Let Go, highly recommend that episode. Next up, at number 9, Pop Pickers, we jump forward to episode number 45, which is Conquering the Fear of Speaking Out. Transcending the Culture of Condemnation. Now, I'm actually really glad this one made it. This is a pet topic for me, if you like. I mean, one of the key things about Conquering the Fear of Speaking Out, or particularly the second part of that, which is Transcending the Culture of Condemnation. Again, if you've listened to a lot of the shows, you know that I talk a lot about boundaries. I talk a lot about even just in the recent episodes, last episode, I was talking about my new program, Bulletproof, which if you want to check out, by the way, go to www.thempaacademy.com/bulletproof, which is about manipulation and the culture of condemnation. Well, the product is about how to become bulletproof to manipulation, more specifically, because manipulation is rife, and condemnation is kind of a societal thing that keeps us from speaking up and expressing our true feelings. And so in this episode, I talk about where that comes from. If you think, there's sort of historic stories that we tell that kind of reinforce the idea that if you speak up, bad shit's going to happen. For example, Jesus getting crucified by the Romans or the Jews. It's like he had his say and bad stuff happened. and I talk about there's lots of modern examples of where that kind of thing still goes on. But when you do break through, and I offer there's the messy way, but there's a more step-by-step approach, which I lay out in that episode. When you begin to get through it, it's one of the ways that you can step into you. When you overcome the fear of speaking out, as you speak out, and it's not just about, public speaking or kind of, it's about in any group situation where you feel like you're slightly afraid, just to be you. This is an episode that will help you kind of get a sense of how what's going on inside and how you can overcome it, and offers you a really good framework for stepping into that. So I love that topic came in at number 9. Which brings us to number 8. Now, number 8, the episode that comes in at number 8 is episode 48, which is, this one did make me laugh. It was a surprise, but it's what I learned from taking LSD. And the bracketed thing for that is these insights could set you free. Now, this one absolutely tickled me that it came in a healthy number 8 on the top 100 charts. And it's, if you're curious about my wild youth as in a band, touring and doing all sorts of crazy stuff, taking drugs was part of it. And I talk about it, but I also tie that together with how, I give you, if you're curious about the background of hallucinogenics in general, how in more recent years, kind of in the 60s and 70s, they were linked to consciousness, and LSD in particular was explored extensively as a means under controlled conditions to help you access a greater consciousness, which, by the way, has been confirmed by the Daily Mail, I believe, reported some science that's shown that there's valid science, finally, after all these years, to that. But also I share some of my experiences of having LSD and how they literally opened my mind. And I would argue that, in spite of the fact that at the time it just was a crazy idea, really opened my mind to the possibility of things not being what they seemed. And to illustrate that, let's have a clip from episode 48, what I learned from taking LSD. And on that occasion, that was, I think, where I really got to experience the hallucinogenic side of things, because literally I was experiencing the form around me melting. It was an experience like seeing portals opening all over the place. And one of the things that is often reported about LSD is it sort of heightens the imagination or the creative aspect. But certainly the experience of seeing walls melting and the form that I trusted my eyes to translate reality and believed in it. This is one of the big lessons I learned, really. But the fact that everything was seemed so fluid left a massive impression on me. So as I said, there will be a link list to all of these, but just in case, this is an audio program after all, you can always find whatever episode I say. If you just go to www.beabrillianthuman.com/ then use the number of the episode. So at number 10 was 5, at number 9 was episode 45, at number 8 was episode 48. So just after the slash, put that number and you can go to any of these episodes, or go to today's show note, which will just be /100 show notes, and find the linked list there. So that brings us to number 7. At number 7 is one I highly approve of. It's a super practical episode number 27, which was the Unconditional Pivot Exercise. How to feel good in crappy situations, which includes a mini training, and this is like a free workshop. So this was recorded around the time of my birthday that year. What would it be? I guess 2020. So yeah, it was like the beginning of lockdown. Now I think about it, and I think that was the idea. It was the beginning of crazy lockdown when none of us were used to it like we have been, and what the hell's going on? Who knew we'd be here? And whatever it is, 2021 nearing the end of. Still in the craziness, but at the time I thought it would be a really useful tool to share. It was based on an Abraham Hicks exercise called the Pivot Exercise. If you haven't come across Abraham Hicks, then just Google them, go to YouTube. They're the secret behind the secret, and I talk a bit more about them in episode number 27. But I wanted to give that exercise my spin, because one of the ways that I often use to embrace the humanity of us, because there are so many exercises and sort of processes within the personal development and spirituality realm which seem to divorce themselves from humanity and expect you to make leaps which are either impossible, overly idealistic, or just frankly unsustainable. So I introduced more of a step-by-step, how do you meet yourself where you are and gradually step into a space. It is an exercise which helps you, in a sense, cut out the middleman and take away the idea that we have to wait for circumstances to be perfect before we get to feel really, really good. I'm going to play you a clip from this one, which is a clip that really gives you a sense of when's a good time to use it. So let's have a listen to that. This is in at number 7, episode 27, the Unconditional Pivot Exercise. So when can you use it? Well, it's great anytime that you catch yourself blaming someone else or some outside situation for you feeling crap. There you are, it's conditional. Well, maybe perhaps a softer way to say that is, if you're making your happiness conditional on the circumstances changing, then this is a great time to sort of pull out this exercise and use it. For example, if you want someone to behave differently than they are, so maybe you want your husband to be more communicative and he's just not playing ball, at least not on your timeline. So maybe you're feeling frustrated, angry and unloved, and you're telling yourself in some way, I'll feel okay when he sorts his shit out or something, or perhaps if only he was more communicative, I'd stop being so angry all the time. So again, what you're doing there is you're making your happiness, peace and well-being conditional on his behavior, over which you ultimately have no control, no matter how much you metaphorically beat him over the head, do the push, pull, the punishment, all the rest of it. You ultimately have no control over his behavior. So you're basically denying yourself your well-being. So this exercise will help you to really cut out the middleman, to go direct to the source and let yourself experience, the happiness that you want right now. Or maybe it's a situation. You want a situation to be different than it is. So there's probably a lot of that going on right now with all, the situational fallout from the coronavirus. whatever it is, I'm worried, fearful, angry, sad, feel unsafe because, and pick whatever the situation is. So maybe it's, I'll feel better when it changes and gets back to normal, or I'm worried about keeping my job, and I'm angry because the stock market tanked. I'm sad because my plans were cancelled. I feel unsafe because people are still ignoring the government's instructions. All of those statements, these are all sort of placing restraints and conditions on your well-being. And ultimately, these situations are beyond your control. Now, if you think about it, what you really want is a change of state, to feel better in some way. And we put that on the conditions, but the answer isn't really in the conditions. In fact, that's the trap. The answer is right here in you and fully available now. And this exercise that we're doing today will get you there. So episode 27, go check it out. And by the way, this is one of the episodes where when you visit the show notes, again, that'll be www.beabrillianthuman.com/27. You can hit a button there and I can send you the sheet, the whole process laid out for you in an easy to follow way. You just need to give me your email where to send it to, all that kind of good stuff. Usual thing. If you want to get hold of a copy, go to the show notes and you can grab that for free. Which brings us to episode number 6. We're getting almost halfway there. Episode number 6, I said there'd be an early one, is episode number 1. In place number 6, which is my commitment to imperfection, a rough and ready welcome. Well, getting number 1 in the top 10 of the first 100 episodes, I was like, how the hell did that one get in? Because it was such a funny circumstance to actually start doing this podcast. I guess in part it could be skewed by the fact that lots of people may sort of find this podcast randomly and start by listening to episode number 1. That could be one reason, but it is kind of fun. And in case you don't know the story of that episode, I'd wanted to do a podcast for years. I talked about it and hadn't actually done it. And I went to a one day online workshop with my now great friend James Lavers, and teaching me how to do podcasts. He said, like, how to get this podcast going in one day. And he showed me how to set things up on Anchor, which is, the platform I go through to put these podcasts out. Walked through it and said, right, I challenge you at lunchtime to switch the microphone on, record it, get it up and get it going. And that's exactly what I did. It was like the 8th of October, 2019. And I just winged it. I did about, I think the episode's about between 12 and 15 minutes of just saying, well, I realize perfection has stopped me. This is me being committed to imperfection. I'm just going to do it, open my mouth, tell you what it's all about. And then I've been doing it every week ever since. So it kind of tickles me that episode number 1 gets into the number 6 of the top 100. Fantastic. So if you haven't heard that and want to hear me like when I had no idea what I was doing, that's the one to go to. Which brings us to number 5. In at number 5 is episode 53. Now, episode 53 is 5 blocks to life transformation and how to avoid them. And this is part 4, reasons why not. Part 4 because it was part 4 of a 5 episode, I guess, series about blocks to life transformation. But it seemed that the reasons why not, I will say some of the other in that series were pretty close to making the mark. So I think it was a popular series, but the reasons why not seem to ring the bells for a lot of people. I think it's a big topic. I think so many people who have a hard time putting action to things can resonate with reasons why not. I break it down, and right at the beginning of the episode, as I do occasionally, I hit you in the face with the down and dirty on the bottom line with reasons why not. Have a listen to this. I'm going to give it to you right at the beginning. I'm going to hit you with it, okay? Here's the thing. Normally it comes in some form of I can't because. So you want to make this transformation. You want to change the habit. You want to improve your life in some way. You want to change your diet. You want to get fit. You want to stop some unhealthy habit. But I can't, because here's what I want you to do. I want you to consider that everything that comes after that, or those three words, is bullshit. Yep, I said it. It's bullshit. It's your excuse. It's your story. And I know it's kind of un-PC and we should be touchy-feely about these things, and I can be. But for the most part, I'd say everything that follows those sentences, there's a few rare cases where there's genuine reasons, but for the most part, when it comes to making a shift or a change, a positive change that you specifically long to or want to or long for, anything that follows those three words is a bullshit story. Now, the interesting thing about that is you kind of have two choices of what you do with that. Well, first of all, you've got to admit it to yourself. Or at least question it. I'd say there's one thing is you can do is question. You got to question the story that comes after those three words. Or you have to just really own it. You have to make an empowered choice about it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to break down. I've kind of gone into, well, there's a sort of about 5 different categories of bullshit when it comes to this. So I'm going to go through them and talk about it in terms of, good ways to question that particular flavor of it, and then how you might make an empowered choice. Now, on the topic of making an empowered choice. All right, so we're in the top 5, and I'll tell you, in the top 4, there are 2 episodes which look at boundaries, which I find, in a way, not a massive surprise. In a way, it's kind of validating. A couple of these episodes I launched around the time when I first did Boundary Bootcamp, which again you can find out about if you go to www.thenpaacademy.com/boundary-bootcamp. Have a look at that program. It's a 4-week program, which is completely comprehensive, as a way to help you go from basically having rubbish boundaries to having really, really good boundaries. And at number 4 is episode 46, which is how to identify a boundary issue and what to do about it. Now, I did this one especially because I found that a lot of people who don't have boundary issues or have boundary issues don't realize that they have boundary issues. Everything's just a bit crappy. And so what I did is I went through a list of all the red flags that would give you an indication that you may have boundary issues, because boundary issues can become really chronic. And the thing about chronic issues or chronic pain of any kind is you kind of get used to it, you normalize it, but it doesn't have to be that way. Now, you can go and listen to that episode, but I also did this is another one of those episodes where you can get a free download. I did a red flags, I think I called it the boundaries red flag cheat sheet. So if you again go to the show notes, beabrillianthuman.com/46 for this episode, you can download the cheat sheet, which is a quick way to get access to that, or just go through that episode as I go through it in more detail than the sheet has. But it's a good way to get a sense of whether you've got boundary issues. Now, that gets us to the top 3. Dun, dun, dun. Somewhere in my head, I've definitely got... growing up listening to Radio 1 with the do 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 do. Oh my god, that's a horrible tune. How does it go? Do 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 do. There we are. If you're young, you'll have no idea what I'm talking about. All right, so number 3. Number 3 is episode 21. And this is an episode that's very, very dear to my heart. It's the anatomy of the soul's dark night, how to recognize it and navigate the dark night of the soul. So I think it's a fairly misunderstood, I guess, what would I call it? An experience that is, I think it's experienced by most humans at some point in their life. They'll hit a dark night of the soul. Certainly if you're on any kind of growth path, you're sort of inviting it a bit. Let's be honest. And but I think it's one of those things, because it's misunderstood, I wanted to give a framework to help understand it. Now, I did come on the back, and I acknowledged in the show, the back of a colleague of mine who had some ideas about the different phases I kind of checked it against my own experience and sort of came up with a sort of slightly adjusted version to share with you, but I wanted the source of that. And it's basically got 6 phases within the Dark Night. And what I wanted to do is I found that it's one thing to understand it, but I also wanted to sort of offer my advice from my own experience of going through dark nights of the soul. And obviously with the many clients that I've experienced and people that I've worked with at events and in different ways, I've seen a lot of dark night of the soul action and wanted to really offer some support. And clearly the fact that it's number 3 on this list suggests that it sort of touches people in some way. I mean, all of these, the fact that boundaries are strong in the top 4 sort of tells me something. But I thought as part of the celebration, I would share with you probably the darkest phase of the dark night of the soul, which is the void. So here's what I share on that episode, on episode 21, about the void. Okay, so after the fall, you come into the void. And the void really is that part that we mostly identify with the dark night of the soul, because it is that that's the deepest, darkest part of the whole process. And the thing about the void that I find really fascinating is there comes a point where you realize there literally is nothing you can do. You are in the deepest darkness. I mean, it can be sort of signified by, a loss of hope and trust, or a sense of disillusionment. In a way, it's a time where, at a personality level, you're sort of choicelessly experiencing the deepest pain or the shadow. And again, it can come with feelings of shame or unworthiness, hatred even, which can be directed both inward and outward. All of these things can surface. But one of the things that I think is a real indicator that this is not just a particularly gnarly piece of process work you're going through, but a dark night, is that no matter what technique or approach you throw at it, any attempt to fix it will fail. And there's a reason for this, because the whole point of the dark night is it's experiential. The soul wants you to experience this shadow, this darkness. So it is a time of pure experience, and really living through it is the only option. So my advice here is to give yourself full permission to be in it. Experience is the point of this phase. I mean, you're literally living the stuff out of you. That's what's happening in this place. So all that reframing, processing, digging, and all that kind of thing, it can actually add suffering to the equation here. I mean, it is really helpful to get some support from someone who can remind you just to be. I think that's one of the most helpful things when you're in the void, is to have someone around who can just remind you, the point here is not to try and fix it, not to try and make it better. It's just to be with it, to live it, to experience it. A lot of times in my practice, my job is to do that, to remind people just to stop and be, rather than sort of, charging it up with analysis and process work. So in the void, again, I want to really labor this point. It's about the experience of it. It is, yea, though I walk through the valley of death. It is the valley of death for you, whatever that looks like, in this phase of your soul growth. And it's a real challenge, because I know a lot of the time there's a lot of pressure, especially in the personal development, spirituality circus, if you like, to try and fix things. If you've got some crap coming up, then you need to do a process to fix it. Well, there's a good time. There's really good times for that where that's appropriate. But if you recognize that you're really in this dark night, then just drop those things. Let it all go. Just let yourself experience the nature, the flavor, the horror even of this that you're experiencing. And it's through going through that tunnel that you come out on the other side with the gift of what it is. So one of the other things I love about episode 21 and the Dark Night of the Soul is that often one of the tricky things about the Dark Night of the Soul is when you're around somebody else who's going through it. So if you've got that experience, that is a great episode to go and check out, because it also gives you some advice, or certainly some understanding, on how you can best support someone if they're going through that period in their life. So as ever, that'll be www.beabrillianthuman.com/21. You get the picture. Which brings us to the top two. Well, I did say to you there were two boundary-related episodes in the top four. Well, at number 2, it's episode 43, Healthy versus Unhealthy Boundaries. How to tell the difference and spot the myths. So this was around the same time. So again, clearly this topic is, is something that people are exploring, something people need to know about. And again, I include this one in particular because there are so many myths. There are really so many myths about, what makes a good boundary, what makes a bad boundary. One of the things I say at the beginning of Boundary Bootcamp is I'm not going to tell you what your boundaries should be. If you're a good person, you should have these boundaries. If you're a successful person, you should have these boundaries. And you certainly shouldn't have those boundaries. But what I do is, and in this episode, one of the key things is make that distinction between what's healthy and what's an unhealthy boundary. And the clip I'm going to play you from this episode really is something where I kind of underline, what is the basis of that? What is the basis of what makes a boundary? What is a boundary actually? What's it really about, at least according to me? So have a listen to this. Boundaries really are about freedom in all directions. People are free to do what they want to do. You're free to do what you want to do, or what feels good is another way to say that. And when you're in resistance, you're really not free. The idea is that if I resist the other person and what they want, then that makes me free. But then you're always in connection to, consequence to another. So in a way, you're caging yourself. You're inside that fortress wall and as unable to get out as you've made it for other people to get in. So this can be a big issue in intimate relationships. If you've got walls put in place, it's very difficult to allow someone close to you. So I'm going to underline this, ladle it on with a trowel. The key here is that boundaries are about you. They're all about you claiming things for what feels good to you and what doesn't feel good to you. Anytime you're going into some externalization around them, you're stepping into the realm of unhealthy boundaries, walls, resistances, and caging yourself. All right, pop pickers. We're at the big reveal. What is the top downloaded, listened to, and viewed episode in the first 100? And this one did surprise me, although again it kind of made me smile when I did all the maths and added up. Actually, it got a lot of views compared to my very small channel on YouTube. It got a lot of YouTube views, which definitely bumped it over the edge. And this is, it's episode 70, the big reveal, Living a Life on Purpose. This was a guest podcast. I was actually being interviewed by my great friend, Vicky Helm, on her show, The Coffee Break Show. And as I often do, if I feel like I've had a good interview on someone else's show, sometimes I'll do it as a guest podcast. I've done it several times in the last 100 and kind of share it with you guys. Now, Vicky and I go back so many years. We used to teach together sort of a 6th level awakening program back in 2000, 2001. And she's gone on to do all her wonderful stuff and I've gone to do mine. And we connected. We stayed in touch, but she was like, "Oh, Joel, you've got to come on the show and talk about, being a brilliant human and all the stuff you do." And I'm going to play you a clip from this show. And I think it's, in some sense, it's perfect as a celebration for, our 100th episode here, because, she asked me about, she clocked something I'd said, I think, which was about chasing enlightenment, or people tend to chase enlightenment, but instead be a brilliant human. And she kind of asked me what that was all about. So in my answer to her question, it kind of gives an essence of, the intentionality behind this show, why I'm still doing it 100 episodes in. It's a great interview anyway. If you want to see, me relaxed, hanging out with an old mate of mine, then that's the one to listen to. It's episode 70. And just have a listen to this little bit of the conversation.
You said stop chasing enlightenment and start being a brilliant human being. Let's talk about that.
Okay. Well, Yeah, I think I'm going to start with the world feels crazy. And I think that's just a reflection of a process that we're going through in kind of in our human consciousness. And part, I think, of why I'm here now in all of this is because I've been through that sort of spiritual awakening journey. You and I were teaching awakening stuff back in, what was it, 2000, 2001.
Yeah, way back then.
You know, and a lot of the things that I've done and people I've worked with have focused on enlightenment as some kind of, I call it like the Enlightenment Olympics. It's like you get your badge if you get there. And I kind of, you know, I got my gold medal, you know, sat in a cave, wore a pashmina, you know, you know, and did satsang and all that stuff. But what I found is that, like everything else, it comes and it goes. And what we're left with is the human, just the human reality, the coal face reality of living in a world which is full of madness and wonder and joy. And I think so. My focus and the podcast, which is called Be a Brilliant Human, came out of that. How can I help people just to embrace their humanity, especially those people who are on that kind of path of wanting to be more aware, more conscious, especially people who serve other people in that realm? Because I found working of, obviously that's been the realm I've worked in for 25, 30 years, that a lot of the medicine, excuse me, becomes the poison when all of that judgment or that goal-oriented stuff comes in, and you don't allow yourself the humanity and the deliciousness of humanity. You know, if if you want to be super healthy and, you know, super yoga or whatever, if that's your genuine passion, then there's going to be no ripples in it. But if you're trying to be super healthy and super yoga or whatever the thing is, and there's resistance in it, then you're trying to be something that you think you're supposed to be. And that, I think, is most of the problems that we have in our personal lives, is trying to be something that we think we're supposed to be, rather than just being ourselves. And in the sort of spiritual and personal development world, you know, there's so much good in it, but a lot of what I see is the problem is that we do that. We think we're supposed to be something. And the idea of being my authentic self gets pigeonholed as kind of this, I am myself, the vastness, the boundlessness, which, yeah, that's a lovely piece of you. But who you are when you're doing the dishes probably isn't that. Or who you are when you have to go and do the 9 to 5 probably isn't that person. These are the human parts of you. And if you can learn to operate in your humanity, and in fact, the thing is to include your humanity in that, you know, wider self, then you get to play in the enlightenment. You get to play in the, you know, the ego. It's like, so what? It's an ego. We've got one. Get over it. It's like,
we got
make the most of it. and then I think we start to have a sense, which is one of the key things for me, is a sense of humor about it. I mean, this is a ridiculous experience to be having, you know, all this fleshy stuff and, you know, all the stuff that goes on. But if you can kind of, without dismissing it in any way, but just laugh, maybe not at it, but with it, laugh with the experience of it. And I think that's what, I guess that's what I bring to the whole COVID pandemic, political, I'll put that word in, situation is like it's a pantomime. It's and the degree to which, if you're a lobbyist or something, then that's your passion. Great, you're in there and it really matters and you're passionate, fine. But I'm just some guy who helps people have better lives. So to me, it's a pantomime. But I'm there with people for whatever, when you can help connect someone to their passion, like in a real way, not a tick box way, then all the lights go on, all the spanners in the work start to drop out, the grease goes in, things start to work. But mostly, again, coming back to it, it's like what our issue is, I think, at its core is simply thinking it is something different than it is. And being a brilliant human.
Wait a minute. Go say that again. Did you hear what he just said? thinking.
So there you go. That's the top 10 in the first 100 episodes. As I say, just go to today's show notes, www.beabrillianthuman.com/100 for the full list. And before we wind this up, I want to do a couple of honourable mentions. First up, a listener mention. I got a lovely email from Ros Cathro down in Australia, who said, a sincere thank you for all your wonderful podcasts. I've listened to them all and always take something special away. I have many favourites, but I'm going to vote for the classic, drum roll, she says, episode 82. Much, much gratitude, Ros. Well, what's episode 82, I hear you ask? It's how to stop feeling invalidated. I think that's a top episode. One of the things that Ros had mentioned to me in our little conversation was that she liked the whole topic of word magic. Ros and I have worked together, and word magic is something that both of us really appreciate. If you go to the episode, again, beabrillianthuman.com/82, if you're just curious, like word magic, what's he talking about? Then go to about 15 minutes in where I talk about word magic. Otherwise, I think it's a really important topic. Again, going back to what I've been talking about recently with Bulletproof and about manipulation, I think invalidation is one of those ways that often societally we get sort of browbeaten. And we feel invalidating situations. This will, as ever, give you the tools, tips, and ideas on how you can overcome that and come back into your own strength. And I had to have my own mention. It's my show. Well, it's our show, but it's my show. So my honourable mention, I wanted to pick something which I thought was either a missed or perhaps an underrated episode. It didn't make the top 10. It was kind of middling in the area, but I think it's such an important topic. I wanted to highlight it in today's show, and that is episode 60, which is embracing polarity, how your pet peeves can become your superpowers. Again, it seems to be a theme on my mind right now, but the polarized society we live in, where so much of the sort of the spin language is designed to polarize us, divide us. It's part of the bigger picture of manipulation. And by the way, if you're affected by manipulation, go now. Check out Bulletproof. www.thempaacademy.com/bulletproof. Check it out. It will walk you through the 7 manipulation tactics, what you need to know, how to understand what they're really up to, and how to counter them. It's all there in that program. But episode 60 talks about embracing polarity because the device of being polarized is used societally, and it's used within ourselves to kind of create these splits, these chasms. And one of the things about that is when you've got kind of an innate polarity inside of you, you can turn it around. You can take it from something which kind of just erodes you and destroys you into something which becomes your superpower. I love that episode. I think it's highly valuable. If you haven't listened to that already, go and check it out. It's episode 60. There you go. That's the honourable mentions. That's the countdown. I think what remains to say is, well, we've done 100 episodes. What now? I've been calling it season 1 since day 1. I think 100 marks the time where we go from season 1 to season 2. So folks, at 100, episode 101 will be the beginning of season 2. And on that note, I think it's important, it feels right to me to take a little break and just take a couple of weeks off, in which I'm going to kind of really think about what I want to do in season 2. Now, I have been saying to you guys, if you want to be part of that conversation, let me know, reach out. I certainly have some thoughts about it. I'll take a couple of weeks. I know I took a couple of weeks off recently, but that was more to do with the fact that I needed a holiday, and then I had some family stuff come up. Generally, it will be every week. But I want to think about and plan what is going to be the flavour of the new season, season 2, and then we will dive into it. So thanks so much for being here through these 100 episodes. I always appreciate your presence. Big hugs to you all. I'll see you in a couple of weeks in season 2. And all that remains is to cue the moo.